This is Al Jazeera. These are the top stories. Voting is underway in the U.S. as people decide if Donald Trump will get a second term or if Democratic Party challenger Joe Biden will become president. Trump and Biden made their cases to voters in battleground states in the last night of campaigning. The election will be decided by about a dozen states that could swing to either candidate. Alan Fisher has more from Washington, D.C.
There are a number of states, key states, important states, that say they won't have all the votes counted within hours of the polls close because there's a lot of work to do, particularly when it comes to absentee ballots as well. So they will all have to be added. So a warning to people watching across the world that this election, which has been, as you say, contentious, it has been difficult, it has been hard fought, but it might not end in the next few hours. It could be a couple of days before we get a final result. So people should be wary of politicians declaring victory unless on either side the result is clear cut. The polls suggest that's what's going to happen. Donald Trump says in 2016 they said the exact same thing and they won, and he's clinging on to that hope.
At least 14 people have been arrested in Austria after Monday's shooting in Vienna. The memorial was held for the 4 people who've died. Another 22 have been injured when a gunman opened fire in the city. Austrian authorities are describing it as a terror attack. Police in Ivory Coast have clashed with supporters of former president and opposition leader Henri Konan Bédié as they try to enter his house to arrest him. It came just hours after President Alassane Ouattara was declared the winner of the presidential election there. Ugandan opposition leader and musician Bobi Wine has been released. He was arrested shortly after he was successfully certified as a candidate in next year's election. His spokesman said Wine was forcefully taken out of his vehicle by police after handing in his presidential nomination papers. Supporters gathered outside his home after he was released. He's been calling for longtime President Yoweri Museveni to step down. Those are the headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera in about 25 minutes after Inside Story. Bye for now.
The US goes to the polls and the world is watching. Millions of Americans are voting for their next president. So how is the election being viewed by other countries? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Khan. After one of the most divisive campaigns in years, Americans finally have their say on who should be their next president. Millions are choosing to either give Donald Trump another 4 years or put Joe Biden in the White House. But no matter who wins on Tuesday, the news will reverberate across the globe. It's often said that the US president is the most powerful person in the world. So in this special episode of Inside Story, we'll speak to Al Jazeera's correspondents in China, Russia, the UK, Iraq, Iran and Israel to see how those countries and their regions are viewing the US election. Donald Trump has had a tense relationship with China. A trade war led to both countries imposing billions of dollars in tariff. Washington has criticized Beijing's national security law in Hong Kong, human rights violations and territorial claims in the South China Sea. But it's the pandemic which emerged from the Chinese city of Wuhan late last year that has come to shape the US presidential campaign.
Because of our relentless efforts, the recovery rate right now on COVID or the China virus or the China plague is 99.7%. Take the vote. 99.7%. And I'm here.
He waved the white flag of surrender. I'll never surrender. We're going to beat this virus. We're going to get it under control. And the first step to beating this virus is beating Donald Trump.
First of our correspondents up is Katrina Yu in Shanghai. Katrina, this has been one of the most complicated, perhaps the most complicated relationships that Donald Trump has with a foreign power. Massive Chinese investment, yet there was this trade war and criticism of its role in Hong Kong. What is China thinking when it comes down to the elections now? Is it that they might be better off with Biden, or is it better the devil you know?
Well, in terms of the Trump administration, it's really a really tough time for the Chinese government these past 4 years. We saw it started out well with Trump really heaping praise on President Xi Jinping, but it quickly deteriorated in 2017 with the initiation of this trade war with tariffs that have really hurt Chinese manufacturers. And then we had these really restrictive technology restrictions imposed that have really harmed Chinese technology companies such as Huawei and really dealt a blow to China's 5G global plans. And of course, we've also seen the Trump administration put a lot of pressure on China when it comes to issues that you mentioned, South China Sea, human rights violations. And because of this, we've really seen a free fall in China's soft power and its standing in the world because of also the pandemic, of course. And this charge has really been led by the U.S. under the Trump administration. But when it comes to this option between Biden and Trump, China's really caught between a rock and a hard place because both of these men have said they're going to continue a tough on China approach. And for Beijing, this frosty relationship between China and the U.S., they really don't see this ending anytime soon. Trump gets re-elected, China will try to build a consensus with Trump, really focusing perhaps on continuing these trade conversations. But if Biden gets elected, we might see a change of style. He might return to a more conventional style of diplomacy. He might be less unpredictable. But really, he's also going to continue to be hard on China, and he might even focus on issues that China is really less willing to have conversations over, for example, social, political issues and human rights.
But isn't it the case that China is simply too big for any real damage to be done by either Donald Trump or Joe Biden, that in fact it is something that the Americans just have to deal with?
Definitely, when it comes to China, what they've tried to do with this election is keep their heads down and really not comment too much on what the outcome might be. As I said, the way they see it going forward, the relationship between China and the U.S. is not going to improve. The age of friendlier engagement between these two countries, the way Beijing sees it, is over. And what they're going to try to do is really go ahead and become less reliant on the U.S. to the point that the Chinese Communist Party recently had their planning for the next 15 years for China's direction. And really the main message there was China has to become more self-reliant going forward, especially when it comes to technology and building up its economy. So when it comes to that, China's its ambitions overall, dominating technology in the long term, these are not going to change regardless of who wins the election in the U.S.
Katrina Yu in Shanghai there, thank you very much. Now, just like the election 4 years ago, Russia is again denying accusations of interference in the campaign in favor of Donald Trump. The president has been accused of failing to stand up to Vladimir Putin and suspected Russian aggression. Democrat Joe Biden has called Russia the biggest threat to America's security. Let's bring in Alexandra Stoyanovich Godfrey in Moscow. Welcome to the show. Again, another complicated relationship between Donald Trump and the Russians. What's Moscow looking forward to? Is it looking forward to retooling this relationship, or is it simply we just have to deal with the cards we're given?
Well, you see, there is far less excitement about these elections than it was 4 years ago here in Russia, and that is both on official level as amongst the ordinary Russians. Now, 4 years ago, there was a hope, which was showed in the polls of public opinion, that relations between Russia and the United States might get better. But these hopes were crushed very soon, and by the summer of 2017, even Vladimir Putin called these relations at their all-time low. So this time, Russia is standing aside, and they are not saying neither Trump nor Biden. They're saying that actually the politics towards Russia is not going to change whoever sits in the Oval Office. What they're saying, and this also reflects in the polls, is that it doesn't matter what happens in United States, that if there is any bipartisan in United States, it is in this consensus of being anti-Russian. Now, these things come because during the Trump presidency, actually what Russia sees is that Donald Trump and his administration didn't do anything to make these relations better. He did impose sanctions. He also imposed sanctions on a very important project for Russia, that is this pipeline, Nord Stream 2. He also expelled the Russian diplomats. So the hopes that this might get better, there are none this time compared to 4 years ago.
But does Russia really have the luxury of standing aside? If Joe Biden wins the election, it's likely that Russian interference in the previous election will come back up. There will be investigations made. So it's likely that there will be criticism again, even from Joe Biden, coming towards Russia. Is that something the Russians are concerned about?
Well, I wouldn't say so, because you see at the very end of his presidency, Obama already imposed sanctions for the interference in these elections. We can expect that if Biden wins, there will be new ones in this respect. But what Russia can hope also from Biden is that, for instance, he does sign the continuing of a treaty, which is very prestigious for Russia, treaty on a New START deal about nuclear arms, the last one standing, that he might revisit the position about Nord Stream 2. So there are also some positive signs that can be expected from Joe Biden, who does not hide his sentiments, which are negative towards Russian politics. On the other hand, as we could hear also in the case of China, he might hit them hard also on human rights issue, on democracy. So Russia doesn't feel that they got something from the presidency of Donald Trump that can get things worse if Joe Biden is elected president.
Alexandra, thank you very much. Now let's get the view from America's traditional allies in Europe, where leaders are at odds with Donald Trump on issues including the Iran nuclear deal, NATO's defence budget and climate change. Nadeem Barber is in London. Nadeem, let's concentrate on London and the UK first. I mean, Boris Johnson is very much hoping that that Donald Trump wins this election, because it'll mean Brexit might get saved. Joe Biden has already been very critical of Brexit because of the threat to to Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement. So is it as simple as that, though? Is it as simple as that Boris Johnson wants a Donald Trump victory?
I don't think you can say it is as simple as that, because Brexit, of course, is a very complicated issue, and so is the Good Friday Peace Agreement on the island of Ireland. So, of course, it's an open secret that Boris Johnson is very, very keen, if not desperate, for some kind of free trade deal with the United States. Of course, the United States will come with its own conditions, which concern some of Boris Johnson's own supporters. But yes, that's top of his to-do list next January, once Britain is no longer in the status quo that it is in terms of its relationship with the European Union. Now, personality-wise, yes, Boris Johnson has got on very well with President Trump, even though he had some harsh words for him a few years ago when he was London mayor. And, of course, Donald Trump has referred to his friend Boris Johnson, calling him Britain Trump. Interestingly, on the flip side, Joe Biden has actually said that he sees Boris Johnson as, quote, the physical and emotional clone of Trump. That's an actual quote from Joe Biden from the recent past. Of course, diplomacy means that will all be put to one side. Hard bargaining will happen in any trade negotiations. But I think whoever is the next US president, it's clear that they won't be entering into a deal if, in fact, it's seen in the US to endanger the security of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and, in fact, the frictionless trade on the island of Ireland. So, of course, yes, Trump was the man who backed Brexit. He even told former Prime Minister Theresa May to sue the European Union at one stage as a tactic, which was never going to happen. But behind that lies some very real concerns, real conditions and real barriers, perhaps, to any trade deal happening quickly.
Well, let's talk about the European Union, the EU, and often the leaders of the EU are referred to as being Germany. Now, Germany has a fraught relationship with Donald Trump. Certainly Angela Merkel and Donald Trump, there's no love lost there between them. Now, when it comes down to Europe, they'll be looking for a Biden presidency, surely.
I mean, yes, basically behind the scenes, most leaders of European governments are looking for stability. The last 4 years have seen instability and a move away from multilateralism. And in many people's eyes, the denigration of the institutions set up after the Second World War, which create that multilateralism, including the NATO Defence Alliance. Now, President Trump has really gone on the attack against many NATO allies, but particularly singling out Germany, calling them delinquent for not, in his eyes, paying their dues. And he has threatened to withdraw, to reduce the number of US troops in Germany. And the alliance is basically hoping, yes, for a Biden win for that reason, for stability and a return to the kind of communal decision-making and approach to security issues. In fact, next March, NATO is reported to be planning an early summit to welcome in President Biden if, in fact, Joe Biden does win the election.
Nadine Barber there in London, thank you very much. One of Donald Trump's biggest foreign policy decisions was to pull the US out of the Iran nuclear deal and reimpose tougher economic sanctions on Tehran. Joe Biden's offered to rejoin the 2015 agreement if Iran shows compliance. Ties with the US have deteriorated in neighbouring Iraq as well, home to about 3,000 American soldiers. Now let's bring in Simona Foltien in Baghdad and Asad Beg in the Iranian capital of Tehran. I want to begin with you, Simona, first. It's a very complicated relationship, as all of Donald Trump's relationships with foreign powers seem to be. You've got a stage where he has backed the Iraqi government, but he doesn't seem to know what to do with Iraq. What are the Iraqis hoping for when it comes to this election?
Well, the major concern for many